Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and today we're going to talk about planting seeds. Henry and I decided that what we needed to do early this year was produce a whole series of videos that could be used as references for people who were trying to learn to do gardening. Some of you who are listening are very experienced gardeners who've been gardening for decades. Others might be absolutely brand new, or maybe you've never even tried it before. So we're going to try and cover a selection of things without trying to make it too intimidating. And planting seeds is obviously a rather important part of gardening. You basically have two choices: buy a seedling and plant that out, or plant seeds. I would divide planting seeds into two basic categories: planting for transplants and direct seeding. Now, what's the difference? Well, planting for transplants means I'm going to be starting my seeds, and then when they get to a certain size, I'm going to be planting them somewhere else. I'm either going to be planting them into a pot, or raised bed, a garden row, something like that. And obviously direct seeding is when I just simply plant into whatever the plant is going to spend the rest of its existence in before it becomes either compost or produces fruit or whatever. First, let's start with planting for transplants. How do you plant for transplants? Now, it's no different than anything else. The only thing that's different is that you have plants that need to be planted for transplants, and I don't even know that I have any. Oh, there's one right there. Here we go, Emerald Crown Broccoli by House Tools. Ta-da! It will say in the information, either on the packet or in the catalog. Now, House keeps its catalog on the internet. Some other companies send out paper catalogs. Takes one half dozen of the other. Even if I am using a paper catalog, I will at some point go to that company's website because I need to know if it's actually in stock. And sometimes things are not in stock, they sell out. This packet will tell me the basic things that I need to know about planting. It will say in the website that they recommend that you transplant. Now, why would you recommend something be transplanted? Okay, let's take a look at a broccoli seed. These broccoli seeds, the largest of them are, well, they're sort of oval, but basically they're about 1/8 of an inch, 2.5 millimeters. And it's really hard, not impossible. I have done it because radish seeds are not any different in terms of size, although there are some that are bigger, to go down a row and plant them. Okay, so that might be one reason why you want to plant to be transplanting instead of for direct seeding. But the big reason is that a lot of things simply do better if you have a very controlled environment when you start them. The professional guys, we watch one YouTube channel called the Veggie Boys. They are a hoot. It's a extended family that runs a vegetable and meat producing farm in Pennsylvania, and they harvest and sell at their own farm market and also sometimes wholesale large quantities of what looks like really delicious vegetables. And having had some vegetables from that part of Pennsylvania before, I can testify to the fact that that area of Pennsylvania makes really good vegetables. They start their broccoli and other stuff like that in a greenhouse environment. It just means you're going to get a much higher rate of germination. Your plant, where it's sitting, that seed, the water, the soil, everything is just able to be controlled precisely. Whereas if it's out in the field, something as simple as a deer walking across it and mashing the seed down an extra inch into the dirt, that could be the end of that plant. So what you're trying to do is make it functional. For small gardeners like we are, it allows you to plant successively in a same spot or to get a jump on the season. So for instance, right now it's wintertime where we are. We're in the northern hemisphere and it's solidly wintertime. That's fine, but I can still grow certain things that are cold tolerant, like brassicas, everything in the broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts sort of family. And what I want to do is I want to give those the best chance that they can, so I'm going to start them up. Later in the spring, I might want to plant some out in the yard. Now, I probably won't, and that's because of rodent and other pest pressure. But I could if I had the right environment. So what I might want to do is get these things started in a building where I can control the climate well, and then when my soil in the garden has achieved the correct temperature to be able to plant things out, all of a sudden I can instantly have a 4 or 5 inch, maybe even 6 inch tall plant, and that's got some ability to fight off some of the critters more than if it was just a tiny little seed trying to sprout through the dirt. It just eliminates a lot of the problems like, oh, your soil gets a tiny bit too dry, it winds up with a crust on top, the plant has a hard time getting through, that sort of stuff. It's rocky, so you don't tend to get good germination. It just eliminates all that. But what do I need to do planting for transplants? Well, obviously, I need seeds. And I need the information that those seeds packets have on them or that the websites have on them. So this says when to plant: early spring and fall, planting depth 1/4 inch, seed spacing 12 inches. That's for when you actually do set it out. Row spacing 2 to 3 feet. That's another topic of conversation for later. Days to maturity 60. Okay, so that means if I plant this right now, in about 60 days, I'll have full-size plants. Could be. Right now, because it's cold and our light levels are low, it'll probably take a little longer. There are other plants like tomatoes and stuff like that that include a big piece of slop time in their figuring. And it'll say sometimes so many days from transplant. Sometimes it won't bother to tell you from transplant. But things like tomatoes and peppers, when they give you a date to maturity, they usually mean from the time you set your plant out until the time you're actually getting tomatoes, not from the time that you plant the seed. So, an important concept. And sometimes it's not a bad idea to read the actual websites where these things come from, because not everybody is totally consistent in the way they give you that information. But without getting too wrapped up in this, what am I going to need? I'm going to need my seeds. I'm going to need a container of some sort to plant them in. I'm going to need something to plant them in, a medium, a seed medium. So it's either going to be potting soil, it's going to be seed starting soil, it's going to be vermiculite, it's going to be perlite, it's going to be one of those things that you can start seeds in. It could also be oasis. Your average person would have probably seen it as part of floral arrangements. It's that green, it's usually green, and it looks almost like a crunchy sponge. Does that make sense? Because it will actually crush if you squish it. But it looks like a sort of a crunchy sponge in a decent flower arrangement. Not one where they just throw it into a vase, but one where they have actually done things with it. They'll put this foam block in the bottom. They'll stick the flowers in it. It'll be soaked with water. Yeah, oasis can actually be used for hydroponics and other types of growing where you start the seed in there instead of in soil. It eliminates the need to wash the dirt off of the roots. And if you're going directly into certain types of hydroponics, you just leave everything intact. You just plop it in. You're not having to worry about the dirt part at all. So you need to start with your plant medium. What do I recommend? I recommend a seed starting soil. Most of the time we use the seed starting soil from Haas Tools. The reason we do is we've had very good luck with it. We occasionally have run out, in that instance, we will try to use an organic seed starting medium from one of the big box stores. Sometimes it's not available. It is also much more expensive than regular potting soil because it has been sieved out. They took out all the big junk. If you think about it, when you look at your average potting soil today, and I'm hearing this complaint not just in the United States, but also in the UK and other places. A lot of our modern potting soil has got an awful lot of garbage in it. It's got like sticks and pieces of bark and all this other stuff, which you wouldn't have seen so much years ago. Part of it may be a bunch of slackers making it. Part of it may be they're trying to make more than they were set up to make because there's been an upswing in gardening interest, and all of a sudden they can't quite spend the time processing that they used to. So what do I do if I can only get potting soil? Well, I clean out the junk. If you can get yourself a piece of hardware cloth, which is just like a screen that's got 1/4-inch holes in it, you can use a large colander from the kitchen as long as you don't mind dirt needing to be washed off your kitchenwares. I actually have a set of garden screens that I bought probably 30 years ago that includes all different sizes of screens, but you could just take anything that you can kind of screen out stuff with and screen out your regular potting soil and eliminate all the big sticks and pieces of bark and all that kind of stuff. The reason you don't want that in there is it can make it difficult for the plants to come up. If you have a big thing on top of a tiny little plant, that plant has now got to come up and get around that big thing before it reaches the light that it needs for part of its needs. So don't make it hard. Other things that I might suggest is perlite or vermiculite. We like perlite because we always have it on hand anyway for hydroponics. And we use a coarse perlite for our hydroponics. I tend to smush it and break it into dustiness, and perlite tends to be dusty anyway. You really shouldn't breathe it. It's a good idea to wear a dust mask if you're going to be dealing with a lot of it. I tend to just, when I'm using it for seeding, I tend to put my seed in the seed medium, get it in there, get it all set just like it says on the packet, how deep it's supposed to be and everything, and then drizzle a little bit. And when I say a little bit, I mean just a layer, like you're trying to put powdered sugar on a croissant or something like that. Just a little bit of perlite, perlite over the top. You could use vermiculite too. The whole point is it helps your soil to retain moisture. It acts like a mulch without blocking the light and without making it hard for the seed to come up. Watched another YouTube channel last year, and they had a problem because their kids were doing a bunch of the planting. They didn't pull back the mulch enough, and they lost entire rows of vegetables because the mulch was basically over. And then what do we mulch for? We mulch to keep seeds from coming up that we don't want. So, that was one of those cockpit era things where it was the kids, and the kids were doing their best, but they somehow missed that little clue that you have to pull the compost back farther. So I'm sure there was a important, since this family relies heavily on their food from their garden, I'm sure there was an important conversation about how, and now we are all going to do without carrots because you didn't do this right, So avoid that sort of conversation with yourself by not covering up the seeds to excess. Don't put any kind of a mulch on there that's going to make it hard for the seeds to come up. What are we going to do for containers? What you plant seeds in is totally up to you. Years ago, I used to save my yogurt containers, and I used to poke some holes in the bottom, fill them with potting soil, and grow my seeds. I was doing it on the cheap. It was something I could do without spending anything. I mean, I was buying the yogurt already, but I do occasionally save bigger containers for cottage cheese and things like that. Those I usually use when I'm gifting somebody seedlings, because that way I don't have to try and recollect my pots, because regular pots are expensive. Even if you have the quote-unquote inexpensive plastic ones, Regular pots can be expensive, especially if you're giving them away, and that's just not in my budget to give away things like that. So if you ever get, a small seedling from me, you're probably going to get it in a sour cream container or cottage cheese container or something like that, because I will take that container, I will scrub it after it's all used, put it aside someplace in the shade where I can use it, find it when I want it. Then when I'm ready to use it, I will poke multiple holes in the bottom of it. So it can drain, because you don't want to drown your plant. Now that's an important concept too. If you're going to actually use something like yogurt containers, you have to have multiple decent sized holes in it. I recommend for a normal yogurt container probably 5 different holes. And you can figure out what works best for you. I used to use an ice pick to poke holes and things like that. You can use a nail. You can use all kinds of stuff. Don't cut yourself. Don't stab yourself. That's the rules. Don't stab yourself. Don't cut yourself. And the holes have to be something that is open, not just a slit. A slit will not always allow enough water to drain out. You do not want to drown your plants. What do we personally use? I'm going to be taking you out to the greenhouse, and we'll talk about it out there. It's easier to show you than it is to try and, put up pictures and all that sort of stuff. What else would I consider to be important for when I'm seeding? Labels. Labels, labels, labels. And you'll hear me say that a million times, because I'm growing more than one variety of almost everything. And I want to know what that variety is so I know if it works for me or not. For instance, I have right here, right now, I just ran out of one kind of carrot, but I have another company's version of it. I have Purple Haze carrots from Haas. I have Hercules carrots from Johnny's, and I have Nantes half-long carrots from Burpees. Now, Nantes, that was obviously one I just picked up in the store. I have grown Nantes variety before. As you can see, they're just a regular carrot. They're a little more blunt. They're not quite as Bugs Bunny as some of the carrots are. Whereas the Purple Haze from Haas Tools, for instance, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this picture, they are a purpley pink color, but they are definitely a Bugs Bunny style carrot. They have that distinctive quick taper sort of thing. And they're all really great carrots. But if I plant those and just sort of plant them in a pot, I usually will plant like half a pot of one kind and half a pot of another kind if I'm going to split a pot. The Purple Haze wouldn't be a problem because they're actually a different color, and the base where the leaves are coming out of the carrot will be a purpley sort of a color, whereas either the Hercules or the Nantes half long will both be a regular green stem sort of thing. But if I were planting the Hercules and the Nantes in the same pot, I'd have to remember which side of the pot was which. Well, what if Henry helps me move pots around? Or what if I move pots around? Am I going to make sure that I've got those two sides in the same orientation? Just too much of a hassle. So just use labels. I will talk about labels and pens a bit later. I'm going to do a tips and tricks video that tells you what I carry in my own seeding tray when I take it out to go use it outside in the garden or in the greenhouse. You'll want to watch that because some of these things are things I learned the hard way a long time ago, and I've kind of compiled them all over the last couple of years into a very functional system. Now, some people are going to say it's OCD. You can call it what you want to. But I know that since I've been doing this, 99% of the time, I know what the variety of plant is, and I don't spill seeds, and I can easily keep track of what I have already seeded and what I haven't. That sounds like a win-win-win to me. So let's move out to the greenhouse, and we'll talk in person about some stuff.